Hey y'all, so I actually decided to change my content this week because I had been watching the Love is Blind reunion, and I actually wasn't going to watch the show because I had watched previous seasons and I was just kind of over it. But then I started to see some things on social media and I was like, oh, I need to watch this just for the psychoanalysis part because that's kind of my jam. So this week's content is about that, but from like the lens of internal knowing and just having the background and information. So there was a point in my life where when I was going through the situations that I was going through. So there was a particular instance that I can remember where the person that I was dating, we were getting ready to go to a wedding, and he had had an interaction with his mom. And after that interaction, he started to be like real confrontational with me. And I was like, why is he doing that? Like, it's so weird. Like, I didn't do anything wrong. Like, I didn't start this conflict. I'm not even a part of this conflict. So, what the heck is going on? And he ended up like wanting to leave, but still wanting me to go to the wedding with him. And it was just a very awkward situation. The wedding was awkward. Like it was a wedding for one of his friends. And so there was already this like built up tension. And he's the only one that I know at the wedding. So you kind of have to like gravitate toward this person. But it was just a very weird interaction. I remember thinking, like, why did he do that? Like, why is he doing that? And then fast forward in our relationship to me having some growth and understanding and knowing and really just having the research and the knowledge to determine what this person was going to do when they were going to do it based on their behaviors. And there was another time where he was going through something and he had mentioned that he couldn't believe that the people in his life weren't reaching out to him to make sure that he was okay, and like I was the only person who was really like on the front lines supporting him, etc. And I immediately was like, oh, this is going to turn into an argument. And I kind of did this like whole out of body thing where I was like watching the situation unfold, but I was also in the situation itself. And what I determined was that, since he had all of these voids in his life, he was kind of using me to fill the spaces and to fill those voids that should have been fulfilled by the people who were in his life, by his parents and his sister, and, all these things. And so I say all that to say, the reason that I am recording on the Love is Blind content is because the filter and the lens at which I can see it now is very different than the filter and the lens that I looked before when I was watching it for entertainment. And now I'm just watching it for like kind of like data collection. And so, anyways, this episode of the Peace Podcast, season 2, episode 13, is Just Give Me the Upper Hand, whatever that looks like. And I would just like to disclaimer this by saying that this is in no way, shape, or form a diagnosis for the characters or the people who were on the show. It's also no shot at them. It's literally just data collection and like determining what I can see happening based on what I know about people and their traumas. And so, I think some of these people are very pleasant people. Like when I look at, the reels they post on social media, I wasn't there. I don't know them personally. And just going to give you my take on some things that I know that we experience in life. And maybe we don't have the wisdom, knowledge, or research to back up what is actually happening. So we go through that. Why are they doing that stage like I was in before? And then also sometimes when we look at things, we're viewing it for entertainment, we don't actually see what's going on with people. We're just like, oh, I don't like the way that they are, but there's really a why underneath of that. So I called this episode Just Give Me the Upper Hand because there were two women in this episode that I watched strategically doing things in an effort to gain the upper hand, which most people would call manipulation, but I don't think that they were intentionally and knowingly and um, in malice trying to gain the upper hand. I just think that it's the way that they've navigated life. And so We're going to talk about them because they're two very polar opposite ways, but it's kind of like the same behavior inside of those ways. So the first one is Jess. And though Jess comes off as this very lovely person, she's super kind, she's super sweet. Um, and she's beautiful, right? And so maybe it's not as apparent in her story, but something that I noticed when I was watching the show about Jess's character, and I'm saying character because I know they make edits, this isn't like the real life person, was that she was like so kind to a point where I was like, all right, this doesn't even make sense for her to be as kind as she is. Like, this is like over the top kindness. And then she shared her story and she talked about how she grew up with a rough childhood and she was in and out of foster care. And then it clicked to me. And so, if you haven't watched the show, I'm just going to kind of share with you a little bit of what happened. So, Jess is in the pods. She's trying to get the man that she is attracted to on a emotional level. She's trying to get him to pick her, and she's also in the female pod, and she's like very interactive and just friendly with all the women. You can tell that she's very like comforting to them, etc. And later on in the show, she doesn't get chosen, and you realize that she, still kind of cares for the guy. But then when she goes to this little like lake retreat that they have, she's just very kind to the female in the situation. She's very kind to the male in the situation, and it's almost like this overload of like kindness for no reason, not even really accessing her own emotions, but more so like just an outpouring of just love and, empathy and adoration for other people. And as I said before, she also shared that she had grown up in foster home and her childhood was kind of a rough one. And like when you watch her on social media now, you might think, oh, she's fake or she's doing too much or, and I've seen that in the comment section of her reels and stuff. And the more I watch her and the more I understand her story, the more I understand why she responds the way that she does to the world. And so one of the things I noticed is that in the reunion episode, she was very hurt. She didn't display it as hurt, but she was very hurt by Jimmy, who was the guy that she had hoped to connect with. He had gone into the media and he had done an interview and he had said something that she felt was like disparaging toward her. And her comment was, well, I thought we were friends. And she based that off the fact that every interview that she did about him was something kind. And, she shared the story and gave him grace and like all of these things. And I started to notice that Jess is symbolic of the people that we know and oftentimes the people that we become and are who protect themselves by being overly nice and overly accommodating and never rocking the boat and always doing what the other person needs. And it comes out as bitterness when she doesn't like love the response, much like that person would be walking around in the world. But the thing that I think that we filter our lens to the narcissists in the world because what they're doing is malicious and what they're doing is ugly and what they're doing hurts people, right? But I think sometimes we forget that that level of manipulation can happen on the other end in the form of somebody just being overly nice and always a yes man and always Mr. Nice Guy and all these phrases that they call these people. And the reality behind the reason that people do that is because they're trying to manipulate the situation so that people will like them and they won't leave. And it makes perfect sense in her situation because if you come from a place where you're in foster care, your literal existence is trying to be liked enough to be kept, right? So, like, if they like me enough, then they might keep me. If they like me enough, then they might treat me like they do their other children. If they like me enough, then they might not send me back to the place that I don't want to go to. And so I understand that she probably has developed those tactics based on her trauma, but it also is a way to manipulate the world around you to protect yourself. If I can be seen as likable, then therefore I will not be treated in a way that I don't want to be treated, or I won't be left, or people won't want to discard me. And one, you can't control that. And two, it really is this protective mechanism that is a form of manipulation. And I've been there. So, like, I completely understand this. Being the people pleaser is truly a tool to try to keep from being left and to try to be liked. Like, I'm sure that there were instances inside of the show, and maybe the edits just didn't show them, where Jess was very much like, yeah, nah, I'm not doing this. Like, I'm not rolling with that. That's crap. Like, I'm going to call somebody out on this, etc. And though she does call some people out, there's still this bubble around the people that she wants to stay in her life and how she accommodates them to make sure that they stay. And that is a way to get the upper hand. It's a way to make it so that they have to convince themselves to leave instead of you giving them a reason for you to be left. And when you think about the people who do that in the world, like the people who do it to you have to really consider, like, what is their intent? Are they being as kind as they're being to you? Are they really that Mr. Nice Guy internally? Like, is that at their core? Or are they doing it in an effort to make sure that they're likable by the people around them? And then you have to, go a little bit deeper and say, what does that manipulation gain for them? And how is it creating a negative situation for me? Like, you'll see these people a lot of times walk around in the world talking about how good their heart is. I just have a good heart. That's why I help people. Well, most of the time, if somebody truly has a good heart, they don't go around telling everybody how good their heart is. They just do things out of the goodness of their heart, not for the accolades or for people to recognize that they have a good heart. And so if you hear them walking around saying that they have a good heart, more often than not, it's them saying, I'm a good person, so don't do whatever this negative thing is, because I'm a good person. So rethink the way that you're addressing me. Rethink the conflict that you have with me because I'm a good person. And that person usually is also carrying a lot of bitterness. So if they haven't accessed their core wounds, if they haven't gone through healing, then they're going to walk around in a very bitter state, and they're going to think that the world owes them something, even if they don't actually verbally express it. So they might be one of those people who says, but look at all the things that I've done for you, which really is just say, do you see how I front loaded the kindness that you should be giving to me? Like, I've stored it up. Like, I've gotten all of these great things that I've done for you and all of these great responses for you. So therefore, if I do something wrong or do something that I don't think that you'll like, I can lean back on those things to avoid any sort of consequence of that thing. And I think that Jess's character in Love is Blind kind of shows that on a magnified level, because yes, she's like, confrontational in certain parts of the reunion. And you see her a little bit confrontational at the end of her pod time with Jimmy the very last time. But on an overall scale, she's just so nice. And I'm not saying that it's a bad thing, but I'm just saying you have to understand that when someone's like that, or when you're like that, there's a reason for it. There's a reason that you become the nicest person that you can possibly be all the time without creating conflict, without ever accessing what you really want. You don't have to always avoid situations in an effort to be kind when you're not truly worried about being liked, or kind of sandbagging your likability so somebody won't create conflict with you. So that's the one polarity side, where it's like you have this super duper nice person and it's kind of a form of manipulation because they just don't want people to leave them and they want to be chosen or picked. And then you have this other side of it, which has really the exact same end result, which is to be chosen, but it's kind of a different form than the way that Jess navigated the show and tends to navigate the world based on her videos. Again, just another disclaimer, I don't know these people. I've never been around these people. I'm just telling you what I see from like the show and their social media. So AD has this quality as well. AD has gone through some emotional turmoil in her life, and she's also sought the help to gain some clarity around the emotional concerns that she's had. So she is on her path to emotional maturity. And in the show and in the reunion and in other social media platforms, she uses that to her advantage, or has used that to her advantage. I believe that every interview that I've seen that's recent, these people will say, oh, I watched myself on the show and here are some things that I've grown on. So again, this is just me taking that little snapshot of time and telling you what I noticed deeper about that person. But it's almost like she positioned herself to being emotionally superior and then picked emotionally unavailable men, as if to say, if I grow him, then he won't leave, because that'll develop a dependency on me to say, well, now I'm indebted to her because she helped me grow into this new version of myself. And so therefore, I won't leave her because she held me down, stood by me, etc., whatever those things are. But the back end of that, which is a very similar response that you get from Jess, is that I'm doing all of these things so that I can be worthy and chosen. Because emotionally available people, emotionally mature people, do not get into relationship with emotionally unavailable people unless it somehow serves them. Like, I've been in that situation. In fact, that has been my relational history up until present day, is to learn all the things and gain all the wisdoms and do all the right things so that I can bring that to a relationship, so that I can show the person that I'm really good at relationship and they won't leave. But then there's also this piece of it where it's, I know that this person is not emotionally ready to accept it, but if they change their entire lifestyle for me, then that has to prove that I'm enough. And obviously, most recently, I'm not there anymore. Like, I've grown out of that space because I understand my why, and I knew why, or I know why I was doing those things then, even though I didn't know it when I was doing it. But I absolutely, like, you know, they say real recognizes real. Like, somebody who does that recognizes somebody else who does it. And so what I recognize in AD is that in the wedding episode where he doesn't choose her, sorry if you haven't watched, super spoiler, but where he doesn't choose her, she breaks down and she says something to the effect of, why am I never good enough? And that struck me because I remember saying that to myself. But I was like, you know what? Her tactics are the same as Jess's tactics. Her tactics are, I'm going to be good. I'm going to be good at relationship. I'm going to be good at being somebody who can be a wife. I'm going to be good at all of these things. And then I'm going to teach that wisdom and goodness to this other person so that they will feel like, again, I've sandbagged the goodness, and because they feel like I've sandbagged the goodness, they won't leave and they won't tell me no. And when an emotionally unavailable person says yes to an emotionally available person, especially if that person is waiting to be chosen, that makes them feel worthy and good enough. So he chose me, even though he wasn't in a space to choose me. But because I put in the work and grew him, and he put in the work doing the tactics that I gave him, now I get to reap the benefits of this. And so now I'm worthy. And I actually, right before I recorded this, ironically enough, I watched a reel where AD did a podcast interview. And one of the things she said was that she's no longer participating in relationship with people who are emotionally unavailable and people who are, she sees the good in and the potential in, but they're not exhausting that effort. And it was interesting because she said that is for romantic relationships, family relationships, and friendships. I'm no longer waiting for somebody's potential. I'm going to take what they give me at face value and I'm going to respond accordingly. And I love to see that from her because I was like, that's exactly what I noticed when I was watching the show, is that she just wasn't quite there. And I was like, girl, same, because I've done the same things. I've in fact almost the exact same situation, where, you know, you wait for this person who's kind of sort of got it, but they don't really have it. And you want them to just become the person that you know they can be because you see their potential. And they start to like downplay your abilities because they can't live or measure up to them because of their own internal battle. So they slightly feel indebted to you, but it's not quite enough. And it's not because you weren't enough. It's because they weren't ready for someone like you, and you weren't quite ready to meet somebody who you felt worthy just walking into a relationship where somebody was at the same space as you. It's like you have to pull them up in order to feel like you're worth something in the relationship instead of just being, being who you are. And so both of these types of people are doing these things to get the upper hand. And why am I talking to you about this? Because I'm telling you with the naked eye, even when I was doing it, I didn't know I was doing it. So with the naked eye, you don't see it as well as when you actually have studied like psychology. And I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist by any means, but I've like delved deep into the understanding of why people do the things they do. And when you've gone to therapy and your therapist asks you questions like, I remember saying in my therapy session, I don't understand why some people are just so particular about things. Like, why would somebody be so particular about that? It doesn't make sense. And then she said, well, I don't understand why you would pick somebody like that when it doesn't do anything for you, when you know that that's not something that you want to experience. So, for the people who are experiencing people like this, I just want you to ask yourself, not are they being malicious? Because usually that's not the case. But are these behaviors that they're using to protect themselves? And is that a means to manipulate you? And if you want to stay in relationship with those people, because I wouldn't say that they're bad people, you need to make sure that you're a reassuring person because that's really what they're looking for, reassurance. And you also need to name that you see it. Like you don't always have to be Mr. Nice Guy. You don't always have to be the yes person, right? Like you can tell me no and give them the safe space to be able to do it if you want to continue in relationship with them. If you know that these people are doing it in an effort to manipulate you and you feel some sort of negative way about it, I would say run from that relationship because it is not serving you to be manipulated by anyone, whether good, bad, or indifferent. And if you find yourself in this space and these are the behaviors that you enact, you're the type of person who's nice to a fault, where it's making you bitter and you're frustrated because you're always doing what everyone else thinks you should be doing or wants you to be doing, and you're making everyone else happy at the detriment of your own emotional well-being, but yet you're sitting bitter because you're consistently doing that, I would say to you, much like I had to say to myself, you do not exist in this world to take up space and draw breath only to make other people's lives more palatable, right? You exist for you and for your purpose. And you can't get there if you're consistently thinking about what do I need to do to make these people not leave me. People who are supposed to be with you will stay just for you being 100% authentically yourself. If they're supposed to be with you, they'll stay. And if they're not, then they're just freeing up space for someone else. And if you're navigating the world like AD, much like I was telling you before, like she did in the show, again, don't know her, so I'm not judging her. Then you need to ask yourself, am I doing all of this learning and gaining all of this wisdom so that somebody can meet me in the same space with all of this learning and all of this wisdom, and we can together come with all of this knowledge and make a beautiful relationship? Or am I doing all of this in an effort to make it so that I have so much knowledge that the person who meets me, I know I'm going to pick somebody who's emotionally unavailable, but I'm giving them so much that maybe they won't ever leave? You are worthy regardless of who chooses you. And I think sometimes we get so stuck on being chosen that we forget our worth outside of those titles. You don't have to be a wife to be chosen. Your job chooses you. God chose you to be the parent to those children. Your friends choose you. You choose you. You choose the things that you want in this world. And so you're not always navigating the world trying to be chosen. You're navigating the world trying to be you. And the more you become, the less you'll be willing to sit in spaces where you're sacrificing, where you're teaching and growing and molding somebody to love you correctly. You'll just be like, they don't. And I'm going to take them at face value, like AD said in that new interview. And I'm just going to act accordingly, because I'm not going to sit here and wait for somebody to decide that they want to deal with their internal wounds so that they can choose me. So that's my take on those two parts of the Love is Blind show. I'm going to be doing 3 more videos this week, so tune into those. If you haven't already, like and subscribe to the page, and continue to listen, continue to share. I appreciate you guys. The subscribers are going up and people are sharing the videos. And again, like, I'm just going through my healing journey, sharing my healing journey with you so that you perhaps may also get to a space where you are on that healing journey as well. I'm not an expert on all things, but I do know a thing or two about being in toxic situations and how to get yourself to a place of peace and empowerment after going through those. So thank you for listening. Remember to look me up on all social media sites and continue to share and like the page and get the word out. I appreciate you guys. And if you don't already, go to my Instagram page and subscribe, like, follow, whatever you call it on there, because the content actually comes out more on there than any other channel. So just want to make sure that you get all the content and access to all of it. I love you guys. And I thank you again for tuning in to the Peace Podcast every week.